Man, I tell you what, I am fired up for this week's podcast. Realistic Randy, Mediokr, Best Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Took last week off as an official podcast is concerned, but I'm back, damn it. And this week's podcast on Score North, I am putting on my GM hat to dissect the entire roster and make it the most competitive roster for the Minnesota Vikings going into 2019. And the theme of this week's podcast on Score North is don't outsmart yourselves. Don't make things too complicated. You go outside, you start your car up, you're ready to drive to work, and what's the first thing that you see when you turn your car on? A low fuel light. So you got, 20 miles left to empty before you need to get some gas, and you're thinking to yourselves, you know what? I think I can chance it. I think I can make it to work just fine, and I'll get gas during my lunch break or after I get off work. No big deal. I don't feel like stopping for gas right now. I'll take care of it later. And then what happens? You go about 3 miles down the road. You pass 2 gas stations, and instead of 17 miles left to empty, you got 5 because for whatever reason, gas just burns a lot faster when you're low on fuel. And then suddenly you're stuck on the road, and you're kicking yourselves. The Minnesota Vikings do not need to make this offseason complicated for themselves. And here's what we're going to do. General Manager Rick Spielman is going to take care of your Vikings for 2019. Let's start with the defense, damn it. Okay, starting with the defensive line. What we got so far as players under contract into 2019 for the Minnesota Vikings on the defensive line. And actually, before I even get into that, before I get into free agency and stuff, because I'm going to bring up a couple of names. How are we going to pay for this? If you guys have been paying attention the last couple of weeks, I talked about multiple ways that the Minnesota Vikings can free up significant cap space. So just a real quick recap. If you trade Xavier Rhodes, you release or trade Everson Griffin, you cut Mike Remmers, you cut Andrew Sendejo, restructure Kyle Rudolph's contract cap hit from $7,625 down to $5 million, and then give Adam Thielen a pay bump to match Stephon Diggs' cap hit of $12,468,750. All that aside, the Minnesota Vikings will have just about $30 million in cap space, okay? So you can check that out later. I was talking about how the Vikings can go after Antonio Brown. Quite honestly, I'm over it at this point because there's another player that came up. I'll just talk about that in just a little bit. But getting back to the defensive line, the guys that we have under roster as far as starters are concerned for the 2019 Minnesota Vikings on the defensive line, Danielle Hunter, Stephen Weatherly, and Linval Joseph, okay? So the need would be 3 technique. 3 technique, okay? What are we going to do for 3 technique? Sign Sheldon Richardson. You can do it. Like I said, you got about $30 million in cap space. Make it work for Sheldon Richardson. I think if you bring him back, that defensive line last year, and look, Everson Griffin, hey, we can bring him back. No, man, this dude is scheduled to make about close to $12 million next year. And I'm sorry, Stephen Weatherly was really productive. He's making $720,000 next year as far as his cap hit is concerned for 2019. Everson Griffin is not $11 million better than Stephen Weatherly. So I think you can be good with him. But re-sign Sheldon Richardson. That defensive line had made up for, really, in my opinion, poor linebacker play last year. And in the case of the secondary, let's say if the secondary is to fall apart, it could make up for poor secondary play as well. You know how they say the game of football starts and ends in the trenches, and that goes for the offensive and defensive lines. If you've got consistent pressure coming up to where even though you're not really having linebackers come off the blitz, if you can get consistent pressure just from your defensive line alone, that's going to create a lot of more opportunities for your linebackers and your secondary after that. So I think you can do some really good things if you bring back Sheldon Richardson. He made $8 million in 2018. Let's say if you can match that, say, hey, we'll give you a three-year deal, $8 million a year guaranteed. Or let's say if he's like, well, if he gets a market, I want to get a little bit more. Let's say, all right, 9.5, maybe $10 million, much like Linval Joseph is getting. He's getting just over $10 million. If you can kind of match that the same, you can still have about $20 million left in cap space in 2019. So with that strong defensive line, you bring back Sheldon Richardson, I think you'll be just fine. As far as linebackers are concerned, moving on to the second level of the defense, who we have under contract right now, Eric Kendricks and Eric Wilson. Eric Kendricks, he took a dip in 2018. I think he can bounce back. We have a big enough sample size with Eric Kendricks to where he should be able to bounce back going into 2019. Eric Wilson, me personally, I really think this defense can get by with an Eric Wilson, okay? So we're going to, assuming we lose Anthony Barr, unless the Vikings, we need to sign Anthony Barr, whatever. So assuming that we lose Anthony Barr, I really think that this linebacking core, because let's face it, if you're in a lot of nickel set formations, you're basically just going to have two linebackers out there. So for the most part, it's always been Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks. I think you can, honest to God, get by with an Eric Wilson and Eric Kendricks linebacker core. Now, don't get it twisted. Eric Wilson, he started 4 games last year in 2018. In those 4 games, let me get these stats here. In those 4 games that Eric Wilson started last year, 32 tackles, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for losses, and 5 quarterback hits. That's that's pretty damn good. And I think the problem is when he would come in suddenly to fill in a couple of plays, like when he wasn't starting, the dude, he's a raw player. He's a raw talent, but he's got a lot of talent. I think if you mold him to be the starter, I think you can really make something happen with Eric Wilson. And he's not making that much money. But having said that, I've seen a lot of concern, we need to draft a linebacker or Devin White. Look, man, no. If you really want to spend a lot of money on a linebacker, not Anthony Barr, or you want to invest a high draft pick into a linebacker, not Devin White, I will give you this. Came out yesterday, on Monday. It is not expected, according to Adam Schefter, it is not expected that the Baltimore Ravens are going to tag C.J. Mosley. And to that, I say, you want to overspend or not overspend. You want to spend a lot of money on a linebacker? C.J. Mosley, that is the guy. Go after him. He's played middle linebacker just like Eric Kendricks. I think you can work it out. And the thing with C.J. Mosley that's really impressive, he's not like a sexy linebacker. He's not really an edge, like an outside linebacker where he can get after the quarterback. He's got about, in his career, he's got, according to Pro Football Reference, he's got 8.5 sacks in his 5-year career. So not really great. Anthony Barr, you compare that to 13.5 sacks in his 5-year career. But outside of that, he's really good against the run, and he makes plays. He stuffs you in your tracks as far as a tackler. He's a surefire tackler. Much like offensive linemen, when they get their hands up on your chest and you're like, I'm just stuck. When you get into the grasp or to the hands of C.J. Mosley, you are going down. It's so much so, C.J. Mosley has played 5 years, same amount of time as Anthony Barr. In those 5 years, C.J. Mosley has averaged 120 tackles per season. Compare that to Anthony Barr with 68. Come on, man. I'm telling you, C.J. Mosley, he's that guy. And quite honestly, you don't need an outside linebacker that's going to consistently rush the passer if you have that defensive line that's consistently getting after it, to where so much so you can't afford to double team anyone on that defensive line because everyone is really good, and you can afford to have 2 linebackers in coverage, one against the run, one dropping back in pass coverage. You can do so many different things with a C.J. Mosley and Eric Kendricks comparison. And you know what? Or combo. And you know what's crazy? The thing that I see with Anthony Barr that comes up so much, and this is my problem with advanced analytic, podcasters or commentators, whatever it is. My thing is, I can use advanced metrics to basically finagle or come up with whatever narrative that I want. Okay, so people say, Anthony Barr, he's one of the best linebackers at creating pressures, creating the most pressures in the NFL. Was he like top 5 or maybe top 3, whatever it is? And to that, I say, I don't care. If you're supposed to be one of the best if you're supposed to be one of the best players at your position group in the NFL, you need to close plays. So if all we're going based off because his sacks, as far as his average sacks as an outside linebacker, isn't great at all. His tackles per season isn't great at all. And all we're talking about is his pressures that he creates. So in other words, we're sitting here raising all holy hell for Anthony Barr because he's one of the best players in the league at almost making plays. You want to know who else was good at almost making plays? Troy Williamson. This dude could run routes, get separation. I wonder if they have like an advanced analytics stat for the average distance of separation before the ball hits your chest as a receiver. Troy Williamson, he was one of the best receivers in the league at almost making catches. I need you to finish plays, dog. So for that, I say, if you're going to pay money or invest a lot of resources into a linebacker, I think you can get by with Eric Wilson. But if you think you need to invest a lot of resources in a linebacker, I would say C.J. Mosley. Moving on to the secondary, the third level defense. Okay, so who we have after the moves that I talked about as far as freeing up cap space, who you would have in the secondary. Let's start with the cornerbacks. Mackenzie Alexander, this is in no particular order as far as CB1 through 4. Mackenzie Alexander, Mike Hughes, Holton Hill, and Trey Waynes. To that, I say you don't need any other cornerbacks after that. Maybe some other cornerback, maybe a lower tier, lower cornerback, cheap cornerback in free agency that you can have is that 5th cornerback, but you don't need anybody else. Your cornerbacks, you are set. Harrison Smith, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's fine. He's doing fantastic. He's still in his prime. Anthony Harris is who you need to go after. So, as far as the defense is concerned, you need to invest. Free agency, you need to invest in the defense. Okay, so that's Sheldon Richardson, CJ Mosley, if you think Eric Wilson is not adequate enough to take you on into the season for a whole 16 games, I think you can get by. But if you want to invest high, CJ Mosley. Sheldon Richardson, CJ Mosley, and Anthony Harris. Anthony Harris is the first safety. Andrew Sendejo, I'm not going to tolerate any disrespect to Andrew Sendejo because in 2017, he had his best year. I was champion for that dude, and that's after several years where I'm like, oh my God, can we get more from this dude? Can we get a better safety? Andrew Sendejo was really, really good. But Anthony Harris, he's younger. He can make plays. He took this defense over the top as far as the secondary is concerned. Bring him back. So that's your defense, okay? Where's the problem? Where are the holes on the defense? I think you're fine. Moving on to the offense. Let's get rid of that right there. Oh, God, can I make one of these soon? Oh, man, I'm going to make one of these layups, I swear to God. All right, so anyway, moving on to the offense. Kirk Cousins, he's going to be our starting quarterback. Moving forward from that, backup quarterback, Kyle Sloter. I've seen a couple of you, they should look at a quarterback in the draft. Kyle Sloter. Now, I do believe that if Josh Rosen is up for grabs, I've made no secret about, I don't think the Vikings will ever do it, but I've made no secret about this. I will go after Josh Rosen. Screw Kirk Cousins and his confidence. Josh Rosen is going to be a star, but I don't think they're going to do it. But moving forward from that, should the Vikings invest a draft pick, maybe a middle round draft pick in a quarterback? No, you got Kyle Sloter. Kyle Sloter in the preseason last year was really, really good. And you're talking about going up against defenses. Sure, maybe in training camp, maybe he wasn't that great, but he's got a ton of talent. He's got confidence. He's got swagger. He's got a really good arm. I like his mobility, the way he can get outside the pocket and make plays. I like Kyle Sloter a lot. He's certainly better than some damn Trevor Siemian who took the QB2 spot last year. I think Kyle Sloter should be your backup quarterback. Moving forward from that, your running backs, you got Dalvin Cook on the roster. You got Mike Boone. You got Rock Thomas. After that, I think you're really solid there. I would like to see if they can get Latavius Murray. So the only free agency pickup there's another free agency pickup on the offense that I'll talk about, but they'll be super cheap. One of them being Latavius Murray. If you can bring back Latavius Murray, I would like that a lot. Having said that, let's say he doesn't come back. I think you can be fine with Mike Boone and assuming Rock Thomas can come back and contribute to the let's say a third running back position, okay? If you can't get Latavius Murray back, I think you'll be fine at the running backs. I don't think you need to invest a middle round pick in a running back. If you are going to draft a running back, it should be much, much later towards the end of the draft. Wide receivers, Diggs and Thielen, nothing to talk about. What we do need in the receiving core is a wide receiver 3. Bring back Aldrick Robinson, okay? You can bring him back on the cheap. And you know what's really interesting? I'm really not a fan of this idea that we need a big body receiver to complement Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. Like they're not the biggest of receivers, so we need this big target. No, we don't. We need a receiver that can make plays. And Aldrick Robinson made plays. All the opportunities that he got, he made the most of those opportunities. Certainly much better than Laquan Treadwell. And you know what? Speaking of Laquan Treadwell, he should never see the field again unless it's like an obvious running play and he's going to block for the running back. Okay, fine. But he should never see the field again as far as an option for Kirk Cousins to throw to as a wide receiver. And for people that come up, and I'm going to talk about the offensive line, and, going after high draft picks, 2 of your first 3 picks should be offensive linemen. For that, I say, well, that's how you end up with Laquan Treadwell. Nobody, find me one actually, no, there were probably several people. I sure as hell wasn't like, oh, I'm so glad that we got this Laquan Treadwell pick. I never said that because I was always a fan of Jarius Wright. Jarius Wright, for all the, you know what? Mike Remmers, I think GM Rick Spielman has sabotaged his career. Outside of that, Jarius Wright was the most disrespected Vikings player under Rick Spielman's tenure. It is unbelievable. This dude made plays after plays after plays, but got benched in favor of Cordero Patterson. Okay, fine. If you're going to use him like a running back, like the Patriots did, or a gadget player, fine. But as far as a wide receiver, Jarius Wright was a better wide receiver. And certainly Laquan Treadwell. Laquan Treadwell outsnapped Jarius Wright. I think that was year 2. That was 2017. If I'm not mistaken, I mentioned this in my last old podcast. I don't remember the year. I don't think it was 2016. I think it was 2017. Like 500 to 255. So he doubled the snaps of Jarius Wright. And it's like, are you kidding me? And he's not the big receiver. He just simply make plays as a receiver. You just need dudes to make plays. I don't care how big of a receiver he is. Laquan Treadwell is a pretty big dude. But guess what? He's not a good wide receiver. So your wide receiver 3 should be Jarius Wright, or not Jarius Wright, Aldrick Robinson. Bring him back. You can bring him back on the cheap. And then also, you've got Chad Beebe. You've got some receivers right there. So your second free agent pickup should be Aldrick Robinson. And then you've got Chad Beebe as a backup after that. I think you'll be fine on the wide receiver set. Tight end, Kyle Rudolph. Should we go after, let's say, who are these? Let's see. Should we go after a TJ Hawkinson or a Noah Fant in the draft with a high draft pick? That would be nice, but is that necessarily the best thing to do when you've got an okay Kyle Rudolph tight end who can at least make catches? And in the case of 2018, he can get some yards after the catch too. He took a big leap in that factor. As far as his overall production, it took a dip compared to 2017. It's not worth it going after those tight ends high in the draft. But Kyle Rudolph, if you restructure him to, let's say, $5 million, I think you're golden. Now moving lastly to the offensive line. 2 of your first 3 picks should be offensive line. Quality offensive linemen, okay? And I've been saying that for the last 2 off seasons, and I posted this on, I think, Twitter and Facebook as well, whereas you should invest 2 of your first 3 picks into the offensive line. And the Indianapolis Colts, they did the exact same thing in the offseason of 2018. 2018, the Indianapolis Colts, I don't have it in front of me. Anyway, the Indianapolis Colts, I posted this on Twitter and Facebook. I believe they had, according to Football Outsiders, they had like the 18th best, they had the 18th ranked run blocking offensive line. And I'm pretty sure, you can check this, fact check me on Football Outsiders in 2018, the 32nd ranked pass protecting offensive line. Okay, so they were one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And Andrew Luck, he's been injured and dealing with all sorts of stuff. This dude was getting his head caved in his first couple years in the league before he was out for that year and a half or whatever that was with that shoulder injury. And then they say, you know what? Screw this. We're going to go after a Quentin Nelson. And we're going to go after a Braden Smith. And all of a sudden, they have one of the best offensive lines in the league in 2018. I don't understand when I bring up that same philosophy for the Minnesota Vikings. Oh, don't reach. You can't reach. You can't. That's how you end up with Christian Ponder, Laquan Treadwell, and Matt Khalil. Well, let's not get it twisted. Laquan Treadwell, you had a third wide receiver. You had a wide receiver 3 with Jarius Wright. That was never a draft pick that you should have made. Christian Ponder, I can't think of one person who was hooting and hollering for Christian Ponder to be selected that damn high in the first round. And in the case of Matt Khalil, you can't fault GM Rick Spielman for selecting Matt Khalil that far. I think it was like the 4th pick in the, what was it? The 2010 draft, 2013, whatever draft that was, the 4th pick in the draft. You can't fault GM Rick Spielman for doing that because coming out of USC, this dude was thought to be the left tackle of the future. Everybody would have taken Matt Khalil at that position if they would have. So it's not my only harp against Rick Spielman in regards to Matt Khalil is that he didn't trade him away when he could have gotten more value out of him. Let's say after year 3, I would have traded Matt Khalil because this dude proved to be a bum, especially in Carolina. But outside of that, I don't see why we have a problem with investing high draft picks in the offensive line. Why do we have a problem with that? We sit here, we talk about, oh my God, the offensive line stinks. Oh my God, all season long. And then the offseason comes and we're like, look at these defensive tackles and look at these linebackers. Oh, we can do patchwork offensive line again? No, man, don't make this complicated. Don't outsmart yourselves. Fans in the stadiums, I wish you would keep that same energy that you have before realizing that you're on the jumbo screen. You see them over there, they're just... strategy, man. Don't make things complicated for yourselves. So again, the offensive line, the running backs, the tight ends, the receivers, backup quarterbacks as far as starting quarterback is concerned, Kirk Cousins is your guy. Defensive line, linebackers, the secondary. I've addressed all of that. And with that cap space that you have, $30 million, you can make it all happen. That is your 2019 Minnesota Vikings, according to General Manager Realistic Randy. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We do this twice a week. Mediokr at Best Sports Podcast with Realistic Randy. Tuesday's podcast on Score North. Saturday's podcast on my personal YouTube channel. Just search Realistic Randy. Twitter at Realistic_Randy. Facebook at Realistic Randy. We will see you on Saturday.